So I do want to honor everybody's time. We've got a great topic today, and I want to go ahead and get started. Mike, are you hearing from your people? I just want to confirm.
Yeah, we've got Josh, and I see that Paul is online right now, just having a phone conversation with Anita. I'm sure she's able to work it out, and we're ready to go whenever, and the folks will join along as they can.
Okay, perfect. I do see Cheryl Carson has joined us from Arnold, so thank you, Cheryl. So let's go ahead and get going, if you would. Good day, and welcome to today's online gathering. I'm Lori Ferguson, and I'll be your tour guide, facilitating today's conversation. As of 1 o'clock today, we had 50 registered participants tuning in and dialing in to hear from our friends in South Dakota how they tackle and get their housing work done and the value that they gain from their learning network. We have 12 new registered participants in today's phone call, first-time attendees, so we're really excited. We are showing you our guest today from South Dakota, Mike Knutson, and you'll hear more about Mike here shortly, as well as 5 representatives from 5 different South Dakota communities, so really excited to hear from them. So as I was saying, we have 12 new registered participants. And thank you to all of you who are joining for the first time today. Your participation gives us an opportunity to grow this network across the state, and we are now even joined today with somebody from Sioux City. So thank you for that. Sherry, if you'd want to advance the slide and show our stats. To date, we've had 9 focused on housing webinars, over 160 participants from 82 communities, 50 are registered for this webinar, and as I mentioned, 12 first-time registrants. So that's pretty exciting. So thank you very much for that. So our agenda for the day. As I mentioned, we'll hear from Mike Knutson, Executive Director of Dakota Resources, as well as 5 individuals from South Dakota, Rita, Trevor, Anita, Tammy, and Josh will be joining us. They're all on board and ready to go. We'll have a Q&A time, and as I hear, Mike even has maybe something prepared for us here in Nebraska and Iowa, so looking forward to that. And we'll also do a group discussion and final thoughts before we wrap up. So at this point, I am going to turn it over to Sharon. She is the Executive Director of South Central Economic Development District. So Sharon, take it away.
All right, good afternoon. I'm Sharon Heffley, and I am the Executive Director of the South Central Economic Development District, or SCED, as we like to refer to ourselves. Welcome to this fine October edition of the HomeNE 2018 webinar series. Our HomeNE program, it's a learning network. We're geared towards housing in rural communities, providing face-to-face and online opportunities to foster interaction, engagement, and skill building for local leaders and conveners. And if you're saying, oh, wait, I'm not a local leader. If you're on the call, you are. A local leader means somebody that has some passion and energy and is willing to tune in and find out what's going on in other areas. So we're glad to have you. Our program is modeled after a similar program in South Dakota, thanks to Mike. And HomeNE was established in 2017 and like I said, has monthly webinars and 2 gatherings per year. You'll be hearing about our gathering coming up the 8th and 9th in November here when we get to the end today. If you're on a computer, you can see the home location of the Nebraska webinar participants. SCED operates as the lead agent for this network right now. Each HomeNE event is intended to empower you as the participant to immediately apply what you learned. So today we're going to hear about the value of a learning network from the South Dakota folks that are getting it done. Mike Knutson is the Learning Network Orchestrator and Community Coach for Dakota Resources, and he has with him catalysts from 5 communities in South Dakota that will be sharing insights, perspectives, and takeaways from their learning network known as Home Address. So welcome to today's call. I need to roll right into introducing Mike then, besides just telling you. Mike and I met, it's coming up on, I think, 2 years ago, when I wanted to know what had happened after I saw a book about doing housing things in South Dakota, and they said, you need to call Dakota Resources, and so it is my pleasure to have him on again. He's a big part of the reason why we have the HomeNE network. He's helped us to figure out what fits Nebraska, and so Mike facilitates and orchestrates the Dakota Resources Learning Network. He has spent 15 plus years working in rural community development. He's been a great partner in sharing the home address network with us and helping to create what we now enjoy as HomeNE. And I will let Mike take it away, and he'll be telling us who his guests are.
Yeah, thanks. And it's been a joy working with you too. It's been fun meeting people. It's been just awesome, and we'll get to some of that later. But I'd first like to even jump in and acknowledge one of my colleagues. Paula Jensen is on the line. Paula, wave. Let them see you. Or I'm going to say, do you have anything you would like to announce or say to folks before we get launched here? Paula's the VP of Advancement. So, yeah, go ahead, Paula.
I'm just excited to be here and to learn from the Nebraska residents as well, and to share our success with our learning network from our participants' view. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Paula. So real quick before I have other people introduce themselves, Dakota Resources is a CDFI, a Community Development Financial Institution, and that means that we lend money to economic development corps around South Dakota to do projects, spec buildings or establish revolving loan funds and even housing activities. Those are just some of the things that we might lend to a development corporation around it. But another thing that we do is we have these capacity building programs, and one of them is our learning network. Now, our learning network actually began with Home Address. It's a housing-specific network. At the time, in 2014, when this was getting off the ground, we had 8 communities that were participating. We had 1 webinar a month. We did 2 meetings a year. And we also had an online platform where we shared success stories and things like that. The reality is I did most of the talking at people at that time, and there wasn't a lot of stuff coming back. Today, things are definitely different. But in the interim, we created 2 other networks at Dakota Resources around other programs that we operate. And one was around entrepreneurship development, another was around community engagement. And our audience was always the economic development professionals and the community leaders. Well, this last year, we migrated into a single network. So we don't really have the home address network as a single network today. We have our learning network, and we really focus around 4 content areas, and we just try to all come together to learn, because we all have the same problems regardless of what our specific interest is at that time. And so you might hear folks that are going to be talking to you in a minute who might reference learning something about entrepreneurship through this learning network. And I just wanted you to at least know that. Okay, so let's go ahead and move to the next slide. I got to admit, the slides are just flowing perfectly here. I can't even believe it. That's awesome. So I want to ask each of our 5 guests and they're all participants in our network, and they're guests here today, but these individuals are economic development professionals, and you can see where they're located around South Dakota. I've asked them all to come prepared with a real brief introduction with their name, maybe a little bit about their background, and just a few community characteristics, 20, 30 seconds or so. So I'm going to turn it over to Trevor, and we'll just kind of flow through the list. Trevor, are you there?
Yes, I am here. I'm Trevor Kramer. I am the Economic Development Director in Faulkton, South Dakota for the Faulkton Area Economic Development Corporation. As you can see, we have a small population in Faulkton. And I've been on this job since late 2015. It has been an incredible learning curve, and Dakota Resources has been an important partner and resource for me and my community as we move forward with our projects.
Thanks, Trevor. I think next up is Tammy.
Hi, I'm Tammy Caffey. I'm a retired elementary principal who decided she didn't want to be retired, and so I work part-time for On Hand Development Corporation in the town of Miller, South Dakota. We're about 40 miles south and to the east of Faulkton, where Trevor's from. We are a community that's probably geographically isolated, and so it's very important to us to just stay as self-reliant as we can. I too joined in about 2015 and have learned and gained so much knowledge because of Dakota Resources and their webinars.
Yeah. How about it, Anita?
Hi, my name is Anita Holon, and I work for the City of Kimball and the Kimball Economic Development Corporation. Kimball has 700 people. I've been in my position for a little over 3 years. Kimball is located right on I-90, Highway 45, and we have Dakota Southern Railroad. And I couldn't do it without Dakota Resources and all their help.
All right, now we got to stop this love fest here, all right? Just talk and tell them a little bit about your town, okay? Rita, please take it away.
All right, yes, I'm Rita Anderson from DeSmet, South Dakota, the Economic Development Director here. And I'm not for sure on my internet, so if I'm cutting out, let me know and I might stop the video. But anyway, DeSmet has a population of about 1,100 people. We are the little town on the prairie of Laura Ingalls Wilder fame. If some of you know that Little House on the Prairie TV series. And you know, where South Dakota is split in the middle by the Missouri River. Well, DeSmet's located just about the center of the eastern half of South Dakota.
Thanks, Rita. And Josh.
Hello, my name is Joshua Hofer. I am the Community Development and Marketing Coordinator for the City of Freeman and the Boots on the Ground for the Freeman Community Development Corporation. I'll be talking here today about a project called the Waltner Edition, which is a 42-acre development. It's the most significant development in the town's history. There's a lot of predominantly housing, but also commercial and industrial. Aside from that, Freeman is located about 45 minutes west of Sioux Falls, pretty much smack dab between Yankton, Mitchell, and Sioux Falls in the southeast corner. We're known for Schmeckfest, and we added a new festival in 2018 called the South Dakota Chiselet Festival. Yeah.
Awesome.
Population,
yeah.
1,300 if I didn't say.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, you know, and each of these people have come to their job and their work through multiple of areas of different backgrounds, right? Some are in education, some are newer to the field, some have been at it a little bit, but there's no single way to come into this field, but nobody ever really trains us. And that's really, I think, part of what this network is about trying to help us connect and learn how to do our jobs better. So now we're going to move on, and I've asked each individual to talk about one housing project that they're working on. And I'd invite our listeners to really think of questions that you might want to ask about this. We're only going to give you the tip of the description of each project, and maybe we can come back to it. And feel free to type into the chat box if you see some questions. Okay, so Trevor, you're up first with your little story about the project you're working on with the new development.
All right, thanks, Mike. So ours was a housing development. We ran out of lots, had no place to build in town, and so we tackled doing a housing development. And actually, the development that you see there, that land has been gifted to us by a local family that really thought that a housing development was necessary. So yes, we have the land. Now the city doesn't want to put any infrastructure or roads and developing of it. So we tackled it ourselves. One of the things during a housing conference, I brought this idea and it just blossomed from there. There was a bunch of resources that were there in the room. I got advice and I heard different ways we could look at that project. We settled on a tax increment financing district to finance the roads, water, and sewer, and actually did that financing with Dakota Resources. And I believe we were the first TIF that Dakota Resources did in South Dakota. So that was an exciting project, and having been at that conference and had all those different people with all that advice or different ways to look at it, we were able to piece together what was the best thing for Faulkton and the Faulkton Area Development Corporation as we move forward with this project.
Yeah, thanks, Trevor. And one of those things that we do at some of our gatherings is we do a process that we call the reverse RFP. It's like the community is bringing forward their project that they want to do. In this case, it was a new housing development, and the different housing resource providers that are in the room get a chance to go from table to table, meeting each community leader and telling them, here's how I could maybe be a part of your project. And it's like we're asking these resource providers to sell their services to the community rather than the other way around. And it's really been insightful for both groups to have those conversations. So that's what Trevor was just referring. Yeah, okay. So let's turn it over and go to our next participant, the next slide. And I guess it's Tammy. Tammy, you want to take it away?
Thanks, Mike. One of my first housing gatherings that I attended, I got to experience just what Mike was talking about, where I met several resource providers around the state, South Dakota Housing, HAPPY, USDA Rural Development, and learned about what was possible or available in my community. As a result of that, I decided to host a housing fair in our community during our Farm and Home Show, and so that other people in our community could meet all of the resource providers in South Dakota. And as a direct result of that, we ended up finding a family that was interested in buying a governor's home. And it was right at the time when On Hand Development purchased its first governor's home. And it brought a family of 6 into our community. So when your population is close to 1,500, another 6 is a really big idea. And so the house on the top was sold before it even arrived into town. In fact, it was sold before we even purchased the lot to sell to them. So everything was the cart before the horse, with the horse racing down the hill. And South Dakota is unique with the Governor's House program. These homes are built by inmates in the prison system, and they are available. A 2-bedroom home is available for $49,700. The houses you see pictured are available for $56,700. That does not count the basement and all the other work that needs to be done. The house on the bottom of my slide is actually still for sale. As it is, with a full basement, it's 1,200 square feet on top and 1,200 square feet in the basement. We're selling for just right around $130,000. And so we have to find that family that income qualifies, and hopefully we'll move to Miller and increase our population again.
Thanks, Tammy. And I see in the chat box that Iowa is starting a similar program, is what it says there. So some of you may be interested in learning a little more about that. But Tammy, is it safe to say then that you roughly did the development close to $130,000 on that project?
Yeah, the house up above, actually, we closed on that one for $156,000, but that was after we put a garage on. And so that top house with a garage was around $156,000, and the one below without the garage, pretty close to $130,000. So if anybody from Nebraska wants to move to Miller, boy, do we ever have a house for you.
Got to work it when we can, can't we? Yeah, thank you. All right, let's move on. Next up is Kimball. How about Anita?
Hi, we are actually, the Kimball Economic Development Corporation is in the process of purchasing a lot here in town and putting a governor's home on it. The lot is kind of smaller, so we had to change some of our plans with it and get only a 2-bedroom. And so now my board is kind of having debates on, the cost of a garage in the basement and making ends all meet with that. So we're just staying positive and knowing that we might have bumps in the roads and making sure that it'll all work out so we can get both the garage and the basement put on. We're also working with the school to try to keep their house that they're building here in town, which I think we are doing pretty good because they have a potential buyer for that already to keep it in town. So.
Thanks, Anita. So, Anita, have you acquired the property where you're going to put it?
We are in the process of it right now. We're looking at title insurance and getting the papers drawn up from the lawyer for that right now.
Great. Well, Anita has a lot of background in helping with some environmental cleanup and just the working with our Department of Environment and Natural Resources. And so when we have some questions about those types of things, we know that we can turn to Anita to seek her advice on some of that stuff. Now, who's next? I think we're moving on to Freeman. Josh. Josh, we don't hear you right now.
Sorry, my fault. So my project is, we called it the Waltner Addition. This is it's a mixed-use 42-acre land development. It's around 41 lots, and is Freeman's about all kind of sits in 1 square mile. So this is by far the most significant project in the town's history. It kicked off in 2017, and I came on fairly right around the time of this everything getting rolling. So this is kind of preliminary stages. We're just finalizing the plat for the for the entire property, and then the development plan is going to be in 2 phases. First the west side, and then the east side. It was all made possible by a $1.4 million gift from the family that also enabled us to establish a second industrial park in town. One of the things that we are haggling with is historically the city has been involved with infrastructure inputs on streets and such in Freeman, but on a much smaller scale. You know, nothing like a subdivision or some such. You know, we're talking like, oh, the city wants to extend a street and we're going to put 3 houses down. So the precedent is that the city was involved in some capacity, which the Development Corp is pointing to. The city is in turn saying, holy cow, this is way beyond anything we've ever seen and will have ever dealt with. So there's an interesting, 2018 has been a haggling process between the city and the Development Corp, and we are days from a complete plat. And so that's about, so I'm slightly behind in the process from a couple of the others that you're gonna hear, but still valuable to be part of the network in that fashion.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Now, what's interesting to me about both of the new developments that we've described so far is that we've had land that's been given that's helping to buy down the development costs. I struggle to think of what it costs when we don't have those gifts. But also, it's often the development corporations in our communities that are taking on the risk of doing the development. And we don't have private developers stepping into that role. If there's thoughts and suggestions about how we might learn to develop those private developers, we'd love to hear about that, okay? So we'd love to connect in the chat box or wherever if you have ideas about that, or just like to see what's going on in your communities. How are new housing developments getting started there? Now we have one more person. Why does it say Josh by your name there, Rita? And it's just something different here on mine. I don't know if you're seeing it, but Rita, take it away. I'll stop babbling.
All right. Yes, thank you. Yeah, our project, we built 4 new townhomes as a result of our being involved with the Dakota Resources home address program. And I will honestly say that that project would not have happened if we had not been with the home address program. It was all a result of that. But with our project, we first were so excited and surprised actually that we had a community meeting during a blizzard here in DeSmet, and we had 50 people sign up to be on committees. And that was without begging them or anything. They actually just signed up on their own. So that was great. And so then from there, one of the projects for one of the committees was to build some new townhomes. So we were able to get the local housing authority involved with the project because we needed their help and to apply for a grant. But it was an obstacle to begin with because that housing authority was too busy to be involved. And so then we got the support we needed then from one of the home address meetings to submit an application to the South Dakota Housing Authority. And we were able to get a grant for $300,000, which then was about half of the project. And so from there, then the project moved forward, and we found someone from the committee who would manage the project and oversee it. That was challenged before. And then as we were building them, we had 20 people on the list to move into these 4 townhomes as they were being built. And so then what's even better, because 4 townhomes I know doesn't seem like a lot, but for a community our size, every 4 helps. We have 300 people that commute to DeSmet every day to work, so we really need housing. And then as a result, we now have a developer who has agreed to build 12 new townhomes. So that's what's come out of this smaller project that we're very excited about.
Thanks, Rita. And now I see Rita attached to your photo again, not Josh. For some reason it was coming across. I saw your video camera and it said Josh, and I was confused. So, Rita, as you think about that townhouse project, though, why wasn't it happening before you got involved? What was getting in the way? Obviously, money was a role, but the money was already sitting there. What was preventing your community from getting those units built?
We actually were not able to focus down on one project. It seemed like we had other housing committees and meetings, and we just couldn't ever focus down to one. So by having community coaches come to DeSmet and meet with us, then they helped us to do that. And then also before, like I said, with the local housing authority, they had said they were just too busy to take on anything new. And so with the support of our home address meetings and all, then we were encouraged to and kind of taught how to go to meet with them, and a strategy to go to talk to them to say, you know, we will do the work of all this. We will apply for the grant and find someone to manage it. So we just need your blessings. And so from there, they did come on board, and now they have been an important part of it. They've gotten involved with it. So those were the main things.
Yeah, thanks. You know, and one of the key principles that we often tell community groups when we're working with them is that you can't tell somebody else that it's their job to go do something, because we have a tendency in our communities to say, oh, I want X, Y, or Z, and then, oh, that other group over there is the group that is supposed to be doing it. And it just doesn't work that way. We have to find ways to work together, or to do just, you can't tell somebody else, and that's just important for us. I also wanted to lift up that something that each of these people referred to, and maybe you didn't hear in this way, but because we're getting together with housing resource providers, in other words, people who often have some money and expertise in doing development, and we get together with communities and those resource providers in the same setting, it's new relationships that are being built there. I guess that's what I'm trying to emphasize. This is where they really build trust in each other, and I don't think that the projects happen if those face-to-face meetings don't happen. So just wanted to lift that up for everybody. Okay, let's move to the next slide then. Next up, what I want to just share is that we have just completed a housing gathering here last month in September, actually. And you can see the agenda right there before you. We started out with just talking a little bit about some of the important things that we need to consider during a housing development process. We then looked at 3 case studies of communities that have done twin home or townhouse development. Then we talked about how each of these 3 projects had a different funding mechanism and how each of them had different ownership structures. And we just tried to figure out what we might be able to take back to our own communities. We spent some time going to Kimball. We weren't in Kimball, but we hopped on a little bus. We went over about 20 miles away to Kimball and met with Anita's board and just had a great conversation about the things that they're doing. And it was our way to connect with her board and other community leaders there and learn there. And then the next morning we got up and had a pro forma training, a literal, this is how you put together the finances and the financial package for a housing development. We went into some other things, the reverse RFP process, which I then described a little earlier. And finally, the last part of the day, we're trying to connect with a developer about how you can work with developers. So that's what a typical agenda might look like at one of our gatherings. And I'm just got a few questions for our participants. I'm going to throw this open to Rita and Trevor first. If you might just tell me a little bit about what you've experienced at a gathering and maybe even highlight one way that they've helped you with a development of a project. Anything you want to share about one of those gatherings? Rita, Trevor, either one of you, take it away. Both of you.
This is Rita. Well, it definitely was bringing the resources to us. Like I said, even with writing that grant before to get the townhomes, I had gone to some meetings with the South Dakota Housing Authority, but that just seemed too overwhelming to me until actually sat down with the Housing Authority at the table at one of these gatherings, and they told us how they would help us do it and how it was easier than what it looked like it would be, and then that they would work with us all the way through. So there too, that project would not have happened with if we weren't able to sit down with them to give us that coaching and that support. So that was just one of the ways. Trevor, you want to take it over? Something else?
Sure, Rita. Well, when they said that reverse RFP, and I talked about that before on starting that housing development, we went through it again here in Chamberlain on the 5th and 6th, and I brought a twin home concept to put into that housing development, and really gained a lot of information around that. But what I really gained is one of the resources knew a developer that was building in a community nearby that I didn't know about, and now we've connected, and now there's a chance that he's going to build some units in that housing development, and they're triplexes. And so he's excited about it. We're excited about it. So again, that meeting people and people know people, and you don't know what you don't know kind of a thing. And there's no value that you can put on that. I mean, that could be a game changer for that housing development, just because you know the right person who knows the right person. In those face-to-face conversations. So that was really powerful for me. It's just very much a value of knowing and working face-to-face with someone.
Thanks, Trevor. And one thing that just popped out in my head was remembering Jared talking about how you helped him related to the assessment process and an idea that you have. And so I'm going to ask you to maybe to describe this just a little bit of what you shared with Jared. But in South Dakota, we have problems in our small towns where the homes we can build new and they don't always appraise out. And Trevor had a nice idea that he did once, and he kind of shared it with Jared. Is that something you want to share now with the rest of the group? Do you remember what I'm talking about?
I do, Trevor? I do, and he complimented me quite heavily on that. But anyway, so what we did after we built this housing development is that we decided that we have an appraisal process in rural communities, and so we had someone that was interested in building a house, and I said, what if we build it and you buy it from us? And you get involved in the conversation, but you build it, we'll build it, you buy it, then we'll have a sale on for the appraisers to use. And so we did that last year. We're in the process of doing it again this year. And that will not only help Faulkton, but it'll help all the smaller towns around us for the appraisers to use for a new house, because a lot of times that house just gets built to get financing and it impacts no one. And so it will impact not only new construction, but it will also impact refinances and that stuff as well. And Jared says, oh, it was worth coming just for that, he said. So sometimes you just grab that little bit of nugget from somebody, and we all learn from each other, and that was just something that. So I came from the tax assessor world, from economic development. So that's how I knew about this appraiser problem and appraisal problem type thing. So just different places and different spots that we come from and get in this business.
Yeah, thanks, Trevor. And I constantly emphasize this to our participants. We can learn from each other. It's great to learn from the resource providers and other people who've been doing it even longer, but nobody knows your communities like you do. And that's where it's just so valuable to connect with each other at these events. So I'm next going to talk a little bit about the learning journey that we did with some of you down to Stewart, Nebraska and Central City last December. And that's on the next slide. If we can move to that. So Sharon organized this learning journey and invited us to come along. And we brought a group of South Dakotans down there to Stewart and also Central City. And Josh and Anita were both on that trip. And I've asked them if they might just share a little bit about how was that valuable to them? What did they learn and what have they taken home and used? We'll put one or both, whoever wants to start, jump in.
I will start because one of the comments in the chat box is about housing studies. And that's something that I did not realize before the learning journey of how important it was. And I come back and we did a housing study, and it was 98 pages long, but it was full of great information that talked about our housing situation here in Kimball and how much rents could be up. And I was really glad that we did it. And I didn't realize it was that valuable until after I did it. Also, another thing on the learning journey for me was seeing how clean the towns were, and knowing that we could do the same thing here in Kimball. And so I went to the city council and we asked for a code enforcement officer, and we had 147 junk cars laying around, and we're getting some of those cleaned up. And we've had 3 of the houses, dilapidated houses, removed. So we're on our way to cleaning up the town. So thank you guys for letting me see that and bringing that home with me.
Yeah, I would say this is Josh from Freeman. I'd say a couple things. One, the opportunity to see other templates in different towns and how they're working just as a general rule was very beneficial. In a different state context, it was also interesting because you start to realize what your state's incentivizing and how your different government is working. One of the ways that I utilized, one of the things I appreciate about the network specifically is that Dakota Resources does a nice job of packaging resources into PDFs or files, or capturing. I forget what that specific one was called, whether it was like a capture document of some type. And what I did then was I made a presentation out of it, and then I invited my city council and my development corporation to a presentation in which I kind of laid out the options and what they were doing in other communities, and I paralleled some of the statistics to my own town. And while it sounds very simple, and I'm sure those of you who are much more established it's a simple thing. In Freeman, that kind of communication around housing and economic development really hadn't happened. So it allowed me, having that resource allows me to start the ball rolling. And now I have that resource in perpetuity because I am part of the Dakota Resources Network, I have that PDF to utilize. So it was an important communication tool for me moving forward, establishing the conversation. So.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. And I think what you were referencing is our harvest documents.
Right.
So we tried to put together a document that actually identifies what our key learnings are throughout the time together. And it's not things that we as coaches are identifying. It's what people in the audience, participants are all identifying, and put it into a single PDF. And for me, I was just so impressed with the folks in Central City on how they made the case for why housing is important, why the municipality needed to be involved and engaged in doing housing. That was just really fundamental. And gosh knows I've taken the story of Stewart on the road many times about all the great rehab work that's going on there. So we all want to thank the folks in Nebraska for allowing us to come along. Now I have one more question for folks, and it's just going to be an open round. If we could move to the next slide. And then I'll turn it back over to everybody, and maybe we have some questions in the chat box that we can answer specifically. So, you know, this is how we look at our learning network. We try to build engagement into our activities where people are having conversations in 4 different ways. One of them is in our online platform. It's an interactive, just a place where people can post questions and we can share stories and that people connect. We also have a resource library of different documents. So we even share our bylaws in there occasionally, and people can look at what their bylaws are like. So that's our online platform. We do 2 webinars a month. We have 4 gatherings a year. Those gatherings are around 4 topics. One is housing, another is around supporting entrepreneurs, a third is around engaging community members, and then really the 4th is around running an economic development organization. And then the other thing that we do is every other month, we do a peer-to-peer learning session. People bring a topic that they want to learn about. We then break up into different breakout rooms, and people, whoever has a question gets to ask the question, and everybody else goes to whatever breakout room they want, and we try to help each other. So in one case, a community leader popped on and said she just released an RFP. They're trying to get a new apartment complex built, and the city is willing to give the land for this. They released the RFP. Developers started responding, and they made her feel like she didn't know what she was doing, and she couldn't actually do any of it. And so the point here is that she needed some reassurance that she was taking the right steps, and great feedback to her. In a 15-minute conversation, she was able to move forward. So that's what that last piece is like. Now, my question with that long preface, sorry it took so long, my question to any of our community members is really, how are you participating in those different elements? Are there, what's valuable with these things that maybe you haven't said so far? Anybody wanted, we probably can't have everybody, but maybe a couple individuals, if you would jump on and just share. When you look at those 4 things, how are you engaging?
I'll go. Some of the things for me is I get a lot of questions from the city council, from my economic development board. And so a lot of times I just post the questions right there on the online thing. And yeah, I get a lot of feedback from it, and it works out really good.
So you're actually taking the questions from your board and posting them and finding out how other people are doing things. Is that accurate? Is that what you're saying?
That is correct. Yep. Yep. Questions that they want to know about and learn more about, and I take it back to them after, you know, I get some responses.
Good. Thanks. Who else?
This is Rita. Oh, go ahead, Tammy.
Oh, sorry, Rita. I watch the webinars, and I just recently was on a webinar about the daycare community, and our daycare was having some issues, and it helped me to be a leader, bring in the daycare board into my office, and we could explore some ideas. And I got it all off of that webinar. I wasn't able to be there the day they did it, but I was able to glean the harvest document and use that as a guide to run the meeting with the daycare board. So it was very helpful.
Okay, this is Rita. I was just going to say the gatherings have been so beneficial to me, as far as I always come away with different names, different people to contact, ideas, and so much inspiration and motivation. I see what the other communities are doing, and it's just, you just come home so fired up and ready to get going. So I think that's such an important part of it, is helping you just to regularly to get that inspiration, to realize you're not there alone working on it. You're not isolated. You've got a lot of resources out there to help you.
Thanks. And I just lift up to the other folks who didn't get a chance to answer on here. If you want, you can certainly offer a little bit more into the chat box, but I know we're cutting into extra time, and so we want to maybe end it right there. But I'll share that these folks have developed a great network amongst themselves. They come to each other's communities to support each other. They're willing. None of them even batted an eye when I asked them if they would participate in this event, and that's just because they make this network work. And we're just really excited that they're having this success and doing all this good work. So yeah, Lori, I think I should turn it back to you. We're probably a little longer than we want, but hopefully we did what you were asking for, and maybe there's some other questions that we can be getting to.
Sure. Thank you, Mike. It's perfect. I think we've set a record during this webinar for the chat box. It's exploded with a lot of good Q&A as well as just interaction between the participants. So yes, this is our time now to kind of turn it over and ask some questions of our participants from South Dakota. Mike has asked some questions of his people. So if you have a question for any of the participants today, please use the chat box or open up your microphone and share those. We just ask, if you have more than one question, to limit it to one question and ask additional questions via the chat box. So Tom has asked a question. How are you preserving your existing housing and inventory, particularly those owned by retirees? And that is for the South Dakota participants.
Anybody want to take on that question? Could you repeat it one more time for us?
Sure. How are you preserving your existing housing inventory, particularly those owned by retirees?
Yeah. So I think, and folks in our network, please correct me if I'm wrong, but that's an area that we're not doing a lot of work in. It's something that I think we need to be doing more work to. And I looked at all the good work in Stewart as an example. But I think what we do see at times is that we are creating structures for seniors to move into, and then working to help younger families move into their existing structures, but not necessarily improving the overall quality. So Trevor, maybe that was you who was just jumping on, or whoever else. I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I would agree. We're not doing what we need to be doing to answer that question. I came away from our journey to Nebraska, from Stewart and other communities that are rehabbing, wanting to do that, but that has not been a priority for our board. Doesn't mean it isn't for me, but I don't get to make the decisions. I get to do the work. So I brought that back, wanted to move forward with that, but it was just more than we could tackle at the time with these other projects that we have going on. But I do think that is an important future project that we need to start working on.
Okay. Thank you. If you monitored the chat box, there was a good conversation about the schools building homes in South Dakota. I don't know if any of you wish to elaborate on that a little bit more. we do have some of that going on in Nebraska, but it sounds like it's an integral part of what you're doing in some of your communities. Anybody want to add to that in any way?
This is Tammy. I'll just hop in. Our community kind of looked into the school purchasing a governor's home, and we thought maybe the school would be the secret to the governor's home program in our community. We found out the school is just really not interested in being a homeowner or a landlord, rent to own, and so we had to leave that be. But our school does not build homes, but we did look into the possibility of our school purchasing a governor's home for sale.
Okay, thank you. So any other questions for our South Dakota participants today? Okay. Mike is saying that they do have regional housing organizations that have rehab housing programs. Would you like to articulate on that, Mike, so that everyone can hear?
Just that those regional organizations have programs. They lend money or do they have programs to help in that area, and it's often just to the homeowner, and the communities aren't involved, and we just don't see enough of it in I think our estimation.
Okay. So Amanda's asking, do you find that you are playing many roles, such as project manager, developer, etc., or have you been able to bring in other business partners?
Now, this is Trevor in Faulkton, and I have had to wear a ton of hats, and I've had to learn them all, just about. So in small communities, if you need things to happen, you just got to make them happen, and sometimes it's not perfect, but you just keep plugging along and trying to find people that can give you the information you need. And again, that speaks to the volume of having others that have been through it that you've met and can talk through what you're trying to do. And so the value of this network for us in South Dakota.
Okay, thank you, Trevor. Sarah wants to know if we can get access to the information from your workshop on the Performa. And then she continues, how to put together a twin home project. Sarah, are you meaning a 2 homes or a duplex? If you could just clarify, she's asking via the chat box. But the primary question is access to information on your Proforma workshop session.
Yeah, so the reality of that session is it was led by Lorraine at South Dakota Housing. A big portion of it was just her showing different pieces. I'm not sure that it would make sense if you weren't there in the room participating in that. One little tool that she highlighted that we already have on the network was a tool from Fannie Mae, and it's a document called so you think you want to be a landlord. It's a really neat, very helpful document about how to figure out how you would become an owner and manage a property. And so in some ways, some of the things that she's talking about are actually identified in there. And again, I would just really recommend that. Yeah, great.
Okay.
And Amanda's listing this. I got a link in there. So Amanda, take it away. Maybe you know something we don't.
Yeah, Amanda has put a link in the chat box about housing development developer trainings. Amanda, are you able to open your mic? Okay, she says she doesn't have additional information. She just saw it on the South Dakota Housing Authority website. So if you want to check that link out, it is in the chat box. So great discussion. We are getting close to the time of ending this afternoon. So I'd like to ask our Nebraska participants, what is one item that has jumped out at you today during our time together? Did you see or hear something new? Open your mics or mention something in the chat box. For me, I thought it was the schools building homes and hearing about a couple projects in Nebraska. We will research those a little bit more and maybe bring those to you in future webinars or gatherings. So Marty says he appreciates the creativity and the ingenuity of your programs. So great work and thanks to you guys. Sarah says it's certainly refreshing to see other rural communities getting it done. Kudos to all of you.
It's John. I'll jump on for a second.
Okay.
I like Trevor's idea about finding another party to buy that house so they can get a price established so they can deal with the problem with the appraisals. I like that a lot. I have a question for Mike and the rest of the group in South Dakota about a little bit about participation. Also, we have to build that online platform with like with Basecamp, and we need to get that going in Nebraska. That's the second thing I wanted to mention. And then finally, the question I have for you is, how are you finding, are the people that are on your webinars and in your network, are they members of something, or are they just, is it informally people join, or are they people that you worked with before? Because we've been having some discussions about buying into our program here in Nebraska, and we have a lot of people sign up, and then sometimes they don't participate, and I just have a general question about that. Thanks.
Yeah, so the Dakota Resources Board has directed that our programs have to be self-sustaining, and this really isn't self-sustaining. We do seek some other support through sponsorships, but we charge our network participants $1,600 just to belong for a 12-month period. It does eliminate some communities, and breaks my heart when some communities say they don't have enough money, they can't join, they want to join, they just can't do it. But it does make sure that you're committed. You're spending this money, so it better be worth your time and energy. I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer to that, but that's where we're at. We're trying to build it towards a sustainable model so that we're not relying on just outside sources to deliver it. So, that answer your question, John?
John, we can't hear you.
Yeah, that's good. I was muted. Yeah, that's good. That's what I was looking for. We kind of have been talking about the fact that we have to put some kind of a price tag on it so that it shows some value instead of just having it wide open to come and go, and that's why I brought it up. Thanks a lot for your input. It's great to see all of you again, close to face to face.
Yeah.
Hey.
You know, and so Paula shared some other facts about the way we operate. I think it had to have been Paula in the chat box, and that's information that you might find beneficial. If there is a community member that wanted to say something about that price point, or anything, you know, why do you pay this money? Why do you, I don't know. Is there anything that you wanted to add to that comment that I made?
This is
Don't
Rita.
expect you to.
No, this is Rita. It's definitely been worth it for us. My board and all feel that what we get out of that and the amount of things, and also, as Paul has shown you, then it helps cover the costs on some of the retreats and some of those things that we go to also. So it's not just that putting that money out up front. You also get a lot of like kickback for half price on some of your other things that you do. So my board really feels that it's definitely worth it.
It hasn't always been that way though, Rita, has it? We had some long conversations where you were trying to convince them to join. So I just want to acknowledge that too.
Yes, to begin with, they definitely did not think it would be the right thing to do, but since it's what we've gotten out of it, it's just proven it.
Okay. Super information. Thank you. Just to wrap up as we close for the day, we wanted to share the results of our poll question we asked at the beginning. How many HomeNE webinars have you participated in thus far, and the results. We have several of you, 42% of you have participated in one, 21%, and several of you have participated in 5 or 8. So we appreciate that. Keep coming back. I learn more and more every month. So don't stop participating. So just to give a little bit of a plug here for our fall gathering, this will be our second one this year. We had a spring gathering in April. We will be gathering together in North Platte November 8th and 9th, starting at 12:30 the afternoon of November 8th. You can find all the registration information on our webpage at sked.us/HomeNE. There is the agenda. We have I think I'm really excited about this agenda and the things that we'll be sharing. We'll have speakers from Benkelman, Nebraska, the North Platte Hospital, as well as Arthur County High School, who is doing a little bit of what we talked about today. Creating homes, making homes available for their teachers. Arthur County is very rural, very remote, and then we'll end the evening with dinner and then start off again Friday morning. So if you are interested in participating, please feel free to check us out. Registration is only $99 if you register prior to or by October 31st. So feel free to check that out and join us in North Platte next month. So just talking about next month, what do we got to follow up today? That will be tough to do, but November 15th is our next webinar. Once again at 2 o'clock. We'll be looking back and looking forward is the title of our topic. That day we'll be doing a recap of the gathering in North Platte, as well as being joined by Joe Cohote. He is the managing partner of Kissel and Cohote Associates. He's a registered lobbyist in Lincoln, and he'll be giving us an overview of potential legislation coming up that may impact rural housing. So I think it's always in this election cycle that we're in, and it's voting time to be aware of what's coming up in the next legislative session. So I look forward to Joe joining us next month in November. So with that, does anybody have any parting thoughts that they want to share? Mike, I assume you and your people are available for any additional questions after today. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, and this webinar is available a little bit later on our YouTube channel, and I believe we will be sending out the slide presentation as well, so that will have contact information as well. So Mike, anything else you want to add to today?
Not really. I just want to thank each of our South Dakotans for volunteering to do this with me. They're the real deal, and we just really appreciate all the good hard work that they do for their communities. Yes, I would agree. I have learned so much just from hearing them. The more we hear, the more listen, I think we all grow as a result. So thank you to all of you for that, and thank you to all of you who've joined us today. And if there's nothing else from anyone, have a great day, everybody. We'll see you in North Platte in November. So thank you.
Thanks so much, everybody. Really appreciate you participating today, especially those of you from South Dakota that gave us your time.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
Have a great day, everyone.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yeah, enjoyed it.